So hi guys, in this video we're going to create our first database in SQL. We're going to create our first table in that database. We are going to fill that table with this data, and then last but not least we're going to query that table to see if our data is really in that table. So we got a lot to do. Let's get started. Now I'm going to start with first of all general SQL, and then we're going to go into Postgres, MySQL, and finally in Access. Right. Now if I want to create a table in SQL, I have to see with my data. I mean, here I can see my headers are driver ID, first name, surname, victories, and championships, and this is the general SQL code for that. I have to create table, and then what's the table called? I will call it drivers, and then I will have to open brackets and close bracket, and then in there I write the fields that I want in that table, and the fields are driver ID, first name, surname, victories, and championships. Now this is valid SQL code. The only thing what's missing here are the types, the field types. Now we have effectively 3 number types where there are digits in there and 2 text. Now let's start with the text. The text fields in all database you have 2 types of text fields. One of them is the varchar, and then you open brackets, and in that you put in the maximum number of characters you want to have in there. So let's say let's say surname, let's say 55. So that means that the field surname can maximum take 55 characters. However, it depends on the size of each surname. You've got a big surname, that field will expand and cater for that big surname. If you've got a small surname, that field will contract and cater for that small surname. However, regardless, it will maximum take 55 characters. So any surnames bigger than 55 characters you get problems with that. Okay? And if your surnames are only, let's say, 10 characters, no problem. The field that field will only consume 10 characters, not more. But it can go up to 55. Yeah. Same. Now you've got another type of text field which is called char in some database application, and char is fixed length, which means that regardless how big or small your surnames or your names are, this field will always consume the same space. Let's say if you have a space of, let's say, 10 characters and your data only requires 4, the other 6 will be filled with empty space. Okay. Now in some database packages, let's say like MySQL, char types give better performance than varchars. However, the whole row has to be of type char. Now, but that's only in MySQL. In Postgres, that doesn't give you an advantage. So you always have to weigh what you need. Okay. Now I'm going to do here varchar as well. However, I'm going to use a smaller max. I'm going to say 30 because I don't know of any first name which exceeds 30 characters. Okay. Now coming to the numbers, if you look at the numbers, they're all integers, no decimals in there, and there's no possibility of any decimals in there because you can't have a decimal ID. Neither can you have a decimal victories. You either have 5 or 6 victories. You can't have like 5.5. You could in Formula 1, but I'm going to disregard these cases and I'm just going to take full digits. And then championships, again, they're also integers. Right. Now, it depends on the package you use. In Postgres, the smallest integer is the small int, and that goes from minus 32,700 something till plus 32,767, if I'm not mistaken. Okay, this is also true for MySQL. The small int, they've also got small int, and that small int also goes from minus 32,000 and minus 32,768 till plus 32,767. But in MySQL, they also have the tiny int, which goes from 0 to 255. And in Postgres, I would have to do all of them small int. in MySQL, I could use the victories and the championships. I can use tiny int, which goes from 0 to 255, because no driver can ever get more than 255 victories in Formula 1, nor could any driver get more than 255 world championships in his lifetime. So here you're safe using tiny int. I can't do that in Postgres because Postgres, the smallest one, is small int, but I could do that in MySQL. And in Access, same thing. In Access, that would be an integer. However, here in Access, you also got the byte, which also goes, just as the tiny int in MySQL goes from 0 to 255. It's called byte in Access. We're going to see each of them. So I've just built the code for Postgres. And here I'm in PG admin of Postgres. And now what I do, first of all, I need to create a new database. So I just create a new database, and I call that F1 underscore DB and OK. It takes a bit for it to create. And there it is. So now I click it, and then I go into SQL. So now we are in that database, and now the next step is to basically create that table. And the code for the table, we just written that here, and that is, I just got the wrong window. So I just insert that code here, and you have create table drivers, like we said, driver ID, first name, surname, victories and championships, and you have here the diverse types. Okay, so and then I can just execute that code, and there you go. Query returned successfully with no result in 22. So basically now we have created our table. However, it's empty. Now I've got my data here in Excel, and now I want to insert that first driver. And to insert data, you use the SQL command insert, and that would look something like that. Go back to my Postgres, and the code would look like that. Let me just expand this thing here. Okay, great. So you can see insert into. These are SQL keywords, and then you have the table name, drivers in our case, and then open brackets, close brackets, the fields that you wish to insert into, and I wish to insert in all the fields, so I just write them all in, and then the keyword values, and then again open bracket, close bracket, and there come the values in the same sequence as the fields. So basically driver ID, that one is for driver ID, Giuseppe is for first name, Farina is for surname, the 5 is for victories, and the 1 is for championships. And you also notice that I have inserted the text values are in single quotes, whereas the numbers, in our case the small ints, are input like this. Okay? And if I wish to execute only, because if I just execute like this, I will create my table again. I don't want that. I'm going to probably get an error because that table exists already. I just want to execute that insert. So what you do, just select that and execute the query, and you see the query is executed. Now I want to check out, is that piece of data in my table? And for that you have the select statement, and that would look like this. There we are, select. And then you list the fields you wish to show. In our case, I wish to show all fields, driver ID, first name, surname, victories, and championships. And then comes the keyword from, and then after from, you insert the table that you need. And notice, after each of the statements I execute, I always have a semicolon. Okay, here's a semicolon, here's a semicolon, I forgot one here, but actually you need to have a semicolon after each SQL statement that you wish to execute. So now I only wish to execute that select statement, so I just select that and execute. And you see here, there's my table. There are the fields up there, and there's the one data row that I just inserted. Now, I could and basically what I have got to do is basically do the same thing for the remaining drivers, just insert and then just basically the same thing here up front, but only this changes. Yeah, that would be the 2, and then the next driver will come in, and 3, and so on. And one thing you could do, that's what I often do, I have my data in Excel like that, and what I do in Excel, I can through formulas and concatenation, I can basically create my SQL code for the first guy. Let me just expand that a bit. And then basically that's what I did. If you notice here, equal and then open quotation marks. There's the SQL code, and then the driver details are then are inserted with those cell addresses. It's like basically building a formula, but this formula is basically your SQL code, and then you just drag it down or autofill for the remaining rows, and this way I've got like now my SQL code for my remaining 19 drivers, and all I gotta do is copy that and insert that in my Postgres SQL editor. There you go, and I got, like you see, all my inserts very fast. And it doesn't matter, I could have like 100 drivers, it would be just as fast. Okay, and if I select that and execute, I would have all my drivers in there. And proof is, if I again select this one here, select drivers, I would have, you can see now my table is complete. I just inserted all drivers in there. And in the next video, I'm going to show you how you can build your SQL queries in Excel very fast. Why? Because a lot of people use Excel, and I often use Excel to prototype or to have some proto data in there, or often to have the real data in there. And basically what I don't want to do, I don't want to type insert into that statement like 20 or 200 times. So what I do, I build everything in Excel, and then I build a formula, or with a formula I build my SQL code, and then just basically autofill it down, copy that, put it in the SQL editor, and bang, I've got the stuff that I need, just the way I did it here. And like I said, in the next video, I'm going to show you how you can quickly build your SQL code through Excel. For those people wishing to use Excel, for those who don't wish it, well, you don't have to watch the video. Right, so now we have done our job in Postgres, and you see it's quite simple. And like I said, that big chunk of data, inserting that big chunk of data can be easily done with Excel and a few formulas, which I'm going to show in the next video. Right, now let's try the same thing with MySQL. And here's MySQL. I just double click my local instance. And oops, that's an old SQL code. Let me just remove that. So right now, here we go. Now here in Postgres, we created our database through by right-clicking on the server. Here we're going to create our database with SQL, and the way it goes is like this. So this says create database F1DB. So here we create our database, and then comes the next bit, which says use F1DB, meaning that everything now we write from now on is directed to that database F1DB and not any other database on that MySQL server. Okay, so and then I do the same thing I did in Postgres, which is basically create my table, and I have here the fields, same types, except here, because MySQL gives me the luxury of tiny int, which is smaller than small int, especially for victories and championships. So I'm just going to change the type here from small int to tiny int, and voila, there you go. Oops, tiny int. So there we go. So now I've got my database. I created my database. I'm going to use my database, and then in that database, I'm going to create the table drivers with those fields and those field or data types. Okay. And like I said, use F1DB means that anything I write here, this table is created in F1DB. And if I execute, this is how you execute your query. If I execute that query, everything is green, means everything has been created. Right, now I wish to insert my first record, and that's the same thing as in Postgres. I go in here and insert, and it's basically the same syntax. Insert into drivers, and then I have open brackets, I list the fields I wish to insert into, and then the values, and then obviously here the values are in the same sequence as the fields I've listed before, and then semicolon at the end. And if I wish to execute just this statement, I just select it and then execute, and there you go, just done it. And now I wish to see, let me just do some returns. I wish to see my that record I just inserted, I just take select, and that's exactly the same syntax as in the Postgres. So basically, it's basically the same SQL syntax, and I just wish to execute that one, and there you go. You can see my first data record in MySQL. And as in Postgres, I can go back to my Excel after having built my formula. I just can copy that stuff and go back to MySQL and basically paste here, select it. Oops, easy. I gotta take it not so fast. So there we go. Just selected that and then execute, and I just inserted all my drivers. And if I select the select statement again and execute that, and you can see now my complete database. Let me just expand that a bit. You can see my database, my whole drivers, my 20 drivers. I just inserted my 20 drivers in my SQL database. So basically, you see it's the same process as in Postgres. The only difference with MySQL is that I can use tinyInt for numbers or integers, to be precise, which do not exceed 255. Okay, so let's do now our final database package, which is the Access. I'm going to start Access. And here I'm going to take a blank database. It's going to open up a new table I don't need. I'm just going to close that. And I'm going to go to Create and Query Design. I've got no tables. So I'm just going to close that and go directly to SQL. And with SQL, I'm going to insert the following code, which is basically this here. There we go. And you see here, create table drivers, same as before with the other packages. And here I've got open bracket, close brackets, my fields. Now here I've got some difference. Integer is an Access, what small int was with the other two packages, which basically goes from minus 32,768 to plus 32,767. Text is what in the others was varchar. I've got here the same max size as before, and here instead of tinyInt in MySQL, I use here byte. That's the same thing as tinyInt, which goes basically from 0 to 255. Right, and then I can run, and you can see I just created a table. If I double click that, I've got my fields in here. If I go to the design view, I can see the fields, and here one thing I have to say, even though I said create a field of, a number field of size integer, Access made a long integer out of it, even though it's got integer as an option. I don't know why it does that, but it does that. So basically you can, after the fact, you can always change that to integer, no big deal. The text fields, you can see they're okay, 30 and 55, and the numbers here, bytes, are okay, number byte, just the way I specified. Again here, same thing. It's just with that integer, it does not want to take integer, so it just puts it as long integer. Right, but basically I got my table and close. Now another thing, I need to insert that first record. So let me just insert that first record. Same as before, same syntax. Insert into drivers, etc. And the exact same syntax as in all other packages. And if I select that and run, I will get an error because in Access, again, unlike the other two packages, unlike let's say Postgres and MySQL and even SQL Server, it does not. It will handle the whole thing. Selecting a specific SQL command will not bring any result because it will always execute the whole query. So basically, I'm just going to have to delete that upper part and then run. And you're about to append one row, yes. So, and I got that. And if I open up drivers, I can see there's that one row in here that I just appended. Okay. Now, if I go back to my Excel and copy my remaining drivers and try, let me remove this guy and paste the others and try to run, I will get an error because again, Access, unlike the others like Postgres and MySQL, it cannot handle multiple insert statements. So basically, that thing here won't work. I would have to insert each driver on his own. and you can see now I can append that, and I should have now 2 drivers in here, and I would have to repeat that process for a 3rd, 4th, etc. driver. Okay. Now the only reason I'm I'm using Access here in my video series is because a lot of people got Access, and basically they can run the majority of the SQL code I have here in their Access packages without downloading or having to buy any other packages. But obviously, as you see here, Access is not as performant as Postgres or MySQL, or for that matter SQL Server. The only reason I'm not using SQL Server in a series is because I don't have a copy myself. I would have loved to have that as well, but I don't have a copy myself. So basically now, just to summarize what we did, we created our first database. In that database, we created our first table with fields of 2 types, text, which is basically varchar in most packages, and integers, which is basically small int in Postgres. In MySQL, we had the luxury of tiny int. In Access, we had the luxury of byte. And then we populated this table with data, and then we used select to see whether that data was in the table. And that's about it. And in the next video, what I'm going to show you is how to build that Excel formula for your queries, because you're going to use you can use Excel to really leverage SQL, where you can have multiple query SQL statements all at once and just paste them in your SQL editor, and you will work much faster than if you have to manually type each SQL query by hand.